Commander Vera stood at the viewing window of her ship and watched the stars pass by. She was tall, even for a Thalani. Her scales were deep blue, almost black, and her yellow eyes were sharp like a hunting bird. She had served in the Imperial fleet for 30 years. She had fought in wars, survived ambushes, and earned every medal on her uniform. There was very little in the galaxy that scared her, but today she was angry. Humans, she said the word like it was something dirty. They send me humans. Her aide, a young Thalani named Korath, stood behind her with a nervous look on his face. He was holding a data pad with the official orders from the Galactic Council. The Council believes they are the best choice for this mission, Commander, Korath said carefully. Human security teams have an excellent record. Vera laughed. It was not a kind laugh. An excellent record? These soft creatures? Korath, I have claws that can cut through metal. My scales can stop a blade. My reflexes are 3 times faster than any human. What can they possibly offer that we cannot provide ourselves? Korath did not answer. He had learned long ago that when Commander Vera asked questions like this, she did not really want answers. Vera had heard all the stories about humans, of course. Everyone in the galaxy had heard them. Stories that said humans came from a death world, a planet so dangerous that everything on it was trying to kill everything else. Stories that claimed humans could keep fighting even with wounds that would kill other species. Stories about their strange pack-bonding behavior, how they would form emotional connections with anything, even dangerous animals and machines. She thought it was all nonsense. Propaganda spread by the humans themselves to make other species afraid of them. She had seen humans before. They were small. They had no claws, no fangs, no armor. Their skin was soft and easy to cut. They could not see well in the dark. They could not hear high-pitched sounds. They needed to sleep for 1/3 of every day. By every measure, they were one of the weakest species in the galaxy. And yet, somehow, the Galactic Council treated them with respect, even fear. It made no sense to Vera. The door behind her opened with a soft hiss. Korath straightened up immediately. "Commander," he said, "the human team has arrived." Vera turned slowly. She wanted to see these legendary warriors for herself. A group of 5 humans walked into the room. They wore simple gray uniforms with no decorations. They carried weapons at their hips, but the weapons were holstered. They moved quietly, their eyes scanning the room in a quick, practiced way. The one in front was a male. He was not particularly tall, not particularly muscular. He had short brown hair and calm gray eyes. His face showed no expression at all. He stopped a few feet from Vera and gave a small nod of greeting. "Commander Vera," he said. His voice was even and polite. "I'm Jake Morrison, team leader for your security detail. This is my squad." He introduced them one by one. Katie Dunn was a female with red hair tied back in a tight knot. She had a scar on her jaw and eyes that never stopped moving. Danny Vance was younger, with dark skin and an easy smile that seemed strange on a soldier's face. The other 2 were named Chris Palmer and Maria Santos. They all looked ordinary, unremarkable, forgettable. Vera felt her anger grow. "I want to make something clear," she said, stepping closer to Jake. She was much taller than him. She looked down at his face, trying to see any sign of fear. She saw nothing. "I did not ask for your team. I do not need your team. I have my own guards, my own soldiers. The Thalani are more than capable of protecting me." Jake nodded again. "I understand, Commander. We're not here to replace your people. We're here to support them." The Council wants extra security for this mission because of the sensitive nature of the negotiations. The negotiations are simple, Vera said sharply. A trade agreement with the Vrexi. Nothing more. Yes, ma'am. But the Vrexi have enemies, and those enemies might not want this agreement to happen. Vera waved her hand dismissively. If anyone is foolish enough to attack a Thalani diplomatic vessel, they will learn a painful lesson. She expected Jake to argue. She expected him to defend his team, to talk about their training or their experience. Instead, he simply said, "I hope you're right, Commander." Something about his tone made Vera pause. There was no challenge in it, no arrogance. But there was something else, something quiet and certain, like a stone sitting at the bottom of a deep river. "Your team will stay in the lower quarters," Vera said finally. "You will not interfere with my crew. You will not give orders to my soldiers. You will follow my commands and nothing else. Is that understood?" "Perfectly, Commander." Vera turned back to the window. Dismissed. The humans left without another word. Vera listened to their footsteps fade down the corridor. "They seem professional," Korath offered carefully. "They seem weak," Vera replied. "Did you see them? No muscle, no presence. The female, with the red hair, is the only one who looks like she might survive a real fight. The rest of them?" She shook her head. "They would not last 10 seconds against a Thalani warrior." Korath said nothing. Over the next few days, Vera watched the humans when she could. She told herself it was because she needed to evaluate their capabilities. But really, she was looking for proof that her judgment was correct. She watched Jake run his team through training exercises in the cargo bay. They practiced shooting, hand-to-hand combat, and emergency responses. They were competent. She admitted to herself. Their movements were efficient. Their coordination was good. But they were still just humans. One evening, she passed by the common area and heard laughter. She looked inside and saw Danny Vance telling a story to some of her Thalani crew members. They were listening with fascination. Danny was acting out some battle, making explosion sounds with his mouth, pretending to dodge enemy fire. The Thalani were actually laughing at his performance. Vera felt disgusted. This was supposed to be an elite security team, and here they were, entertaining her crew like circus performers. She walked away without saying anything. On the 5th day of travel, they arrived at Korath Prime. The station hung in space like a giant metal flower, its docking arms extended in all directions. Ships from 100 different species were attached to it. It was neutral territory, protected by ancient treaties that even the most aggressive empires respected. As Vera prepared to disembark, Jake Morrison appeared at her side. "Commander," he said quietly, "I'd like to recommend increased security protocols while we're on the station." Vera looked at him coldly. "This is neutral territory, human. There are laws here, treaties. No one would dare attack a diplomatic mission." Jake's expression did not change. "With respect, Commander, people break laws every day, and treaties only matter to those who honor them." Vera leaned close to him. "Your reputation precedes you, human. The galaxy seems to think your species is something special, something dangerous." She smiled, showing her sharp teeth. "I don't see it. I see a small, soft creature who jumps at shadows." Jake met her eyes without flinching. For a moment, something flickered in those gray depths. Something old and cold. Then it was gone. "Hopefully, Commander," he said softly. "You'll never have to find out what we really are." Vera laughed and walked past him toward the airlock. She was still laughing when she stepped onto the station. She would not laugh for much longer. Korath Prime was loud. The station was filled with species from every corner of the galaxy, tall beings with multiple arms pushed past small furry creatures with big eyes. Insectoid merchants shouted prices from their stalls. The air smelled like 100 different worlds mixed together, some pleasant and some very much not. Vera walked through the crowded corridors with her head held high. Her Thalani guards surrounded her in a protective formation, their armor gleaming under the station lights. Behind them, almost invisible in the crowd, moved the human team. She had almost forgotten they were there. The Vrexy delegation met them at the entrance to the diplomatic sector. The Vrexy were insectoids, their bodies covered in hard black shells. They had 4 arms and large compound eyes that reflected light like broken mirrors. Their leader, Ambassador Chikrix, made a clicking sound that Vera's translator turned into a greeting. "Commander Vera, the collective welcomes you. We are eager to begin negotiations." "As am I," Vera replied smoothly. "The Thalani Empire values efficiency. Let us waste no time on unnecessary ceremony." The negotiations began that afternoon. They were held in a large chamber with a round table in the center. Vera and her advisors sat on one side. The Vrexy sat on the other. Guards from both species lined the walls. The human team positioned themselves near the doors. Vera noticed that they had spread out, each one covering a different angle. Jake stood closest to her, his hands loose at his sides, his eyes never staying in one place for long. It annoyed her. This was a secure location. There were Thalani guards everywhere, Vrexy guards too. The doors were locked and monitored. What did the humans think was going to happen? The first day of talks went well. The Vrexy wanted access to Thalani mining technology. The Thalani wanted Vrexy agricultural products. It was a simple trade, beneficial to both sides. By the end of the day, they had already agreed on the basic terms. That evening, Vera retired to her quarters on the station. They were comfortable rooms, provided by the station authority for visiting diplomats. She was reviewing documents on her datapad when someone knocked on her door. It was Jake Morrison. "Commander," he said, "may I speak with you?" Vera sighed. "What is it now, human?" Jake stepped inside and the door closed behind him. His face was serious, more serious than usual. "We've noticed some things," he said. "My team. We think someone is watching us." Vera set down her datapad. "Watching us? What do you mean?" "Since we arrived on the station, we've spotted the same individuals multiple times. Different locations, different times, but always the same faces. They're trying to look casual, but they're not. They're observing us, following our movements." Vera felt a flash of irritation. This is a busy station. Perhaps they're simply going about their business. "Perhaps," Jake said, "but I don't think so. These people are professionals. They know how to blend in. We only spotted them because we were looking." "And why were you looking?" Jake met her eyes. "Because we always look, Commander. It's what keeps people alive." Vera stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the station's lights twinkled against the darkness of space. "You're paranoid," she said, "seeing threats where there are none. This is neutral territory, protected by treaty. No one would dare attack a diplomatic mission here." "Treaties don't stop bullets, Commander, and someone on this station wants you dead." Vera spun around. "You don't know that. I know what I see. And I'm telling you, something is wrong." Jake's voice remained calm, but there was an edge to it now. "I'm not asking you to cancel the negotiations. I'm asking you to be careful. Let us do our job." For a long moment, Vera stared at him. Part of her wanted to dismiss his concerns, to send him away and prove that she didn't need human protection. But something in his voice made her hesitate. "Fine," she said finally. "Do what you need to do, but quietly. I will not have you embarrassing me in front of the Vrexy." Jake nodded. Thank you, Commander. After he left, Vera called her security chief, a veteran warrior named Theron. She told him what Jake had said. Theron ran scans of the station's public areas. He reviewed security footage. He contacted the station authority and asked for information about recent arrivals. He found nothing. "The human is jumping at shadows," Theron said. "There is no evidence of any threat." "That's what I thought," Vera replied. But she couldn't shake a small feeling of unease. The second day of negotiations was even more productive than the first. The details of the trade agreement were coming together. Both sides seemed satisfied. Ambassador Chickrix even made a joke, a rare thing for a Vrexy. During a break in the talks, Vera noticed Katie Dunn talking quietly into a small communication device. Her face was tense. When she saw Vera looking, she quickly walked out of the room. Later, Vera saw Danny Vance studying a map of the station on his datapad. He was marking something, making notes that she couldn't read from a distance. And Jake. Jake was everywhere and nowhere. She would see him standing in a corner, watching. Then she would look again, and he would be gone, replaced by Chris Palmer or Maria Santos. They moved like ghosts, always present but never obvious. It should have made Vera feel safer. Instead, it made her nervous. On the third night, she couldn't sleep. She got up and walked through the station's common areas, hoping the movement would tire her out. 2 of her Thalani guards followed at a respectful distance. She found Jake alone on an observation deck. He was standing at the window, looking out at the stars. In his hands was a small photograph, worn and faded. He was staring at it with an expression she had never seen on his face before. He heard her approach and quickly put the photograph away. "Commander," he said, "trouble sleeping?" "I could ask you the same thing." Jake smiled slightly. "I don't sleep much. Old habit." Vera moved to stand beside him at the window. For a while, neither of them spoke. "What was in the picture?" she asked. Jake was silent for a moment. "My daughter. She's 8 years old. Stays with her grandmother back on Earth while I'm away." "You have a family?" "Yes." Vera thought about that. She had always thought of humans as simple creatures, motivated by basic instincts. She had never considered that they might have the same complex lives as her own people. "Does she know what you do?" Vera asked. "Your daughter?" "She knows I help people," Jake said. "That's enough for her. She doesn't need to know the details." "And if something happens to you?" Jake turned to look at her. His gray eyes were calm, but there was something deep within them. Something that had seen things that Vera could only imagine. "Then she'll know her father died doing what was right," he said simply. "That's all any of us can hope for." Vera didn't know how to respond to that. So she said nothing. They stood together in silence, watching the stars, as somewhere on the station, unseen eyes watched them. The final day of negotiations would come tomorrow, and with it, everything would change. The morning of the final day began like any other. Vera ate breakfast with her advisors and reviewed the trade agreement one last time. Everything was in order. By midday, the deal would be signed and her mission would be complete. She felt confident, pleased even. That feeling would not last. The negotiation chamber was full when Vera arrived. The Vrexy delegation was already seated. Ambassador Chickrix clicked a greeting as Vera took her place at the table. Guards lined the walls as usual. The human team spread out near the entrances, their positions now so familiar that Vera barely noticed them. The final discussions began. There were a few small details to work out, nothing significant. Vera found herself thinking about the journey home. about the praise she would receive from the Imperial Council. Then Jake Morrison moved. It was a small movement, a slight turn of his head toward the main entrance. Vera saw his hand drop to his weapon. She saw his eyes narrow. "Down!" he shouted. The word had barely left his mouth when the doors exploded inward. Vera never saw how many attackers there were. Later, she would learn it was 15. At that moment, all she saw was chaos. Figures in black armor poured through the shattered doorway, weapons already firing. Plasma bolts screamed through the air. The sound was deafening. Her Thalani guards reacted immediately. They were well-trained soldiers, some of the best in the Empire. They raised their weapons and returned fire. 3 of them fell in the first 5 seconds, then 5, then 7. The attackers were fast, professional. They moved with military precision, covering each other, advancing steadily. Their weapons cut through Thalani armor like it was paper. Vera stood frozen, unable to process what was happening. This was neutral territory. This was supposed to be safe. Then a hand grabbed her arm and pulled her down. It was Katie Dunn. The red-haired human had crossed the room in the time it took Vera to blink. She shoved Vera behind an overturned table and crouched over her, weapon raised. "Stay down!" Katie shouted. "Don't move!" Vera wanted to argue. She was a commander. She didn't take orders from humans, but the words wouldn't come. All she could do was watch, and what she saw changed everything she thought she knew about humans. Jake Morrison was no longer the quiet, polite team leader she had dismissed. He had become something else, something terrifying. He moved through the attackers like a force of nature, his weapon spitting fire with perfect accuracy. Every shot found its target. Every movement was precise. A plasma bolt hit him in the shoulder. Vera saw it happen. She saw his uniform burn. She saw blood spray from the wound. He didn't stop. He kept fighting, kept moving. His face was set in an expression of absolute focus, absolute determination. There was no fear in his eyes, no hesitation, just cold, calculating purpose. Danny Vance took a hit to the chest, then another. He fell to one knee, blood spreading across his gray uniform. Any Thalani would have been dead. Any Thalani would have at least stopped fighting. Danny raised his weapon with shaking hands and kept firing. Chris Palmer was hit in the leg. He dropped behind cover, dragged himself to a better position, and continued shooting. Maria Santos fought back-to-back with 2 surviving Thalani guards, her movement so fast that Vera could barely follow them. The attackers began to fall, 1 by 1, then 2 by 2. They had expected easy targets. They had expected diplomats and ceremonial guards. They had not expected humans. Katie Dunn fired 3 shots past Vera's head. 3 attackers fell. She didn't even seem to aim. The weapon was simply an extension of her body. "Moving," Katie said into her communicator. She grabbed Vera again and pulled her toward a side door. "Morrison, I have the principal heading to extraction point." "Copy," Jake's voice came through, strained but steady. "We'll hold them here, go." Vera found her voice. "Your people are dying. We have to help them." Katie didn't slow down. "They're doing their job. My job is to get you out. Move!" They ran through corridors filled with smoke and screaming. Station alarms were blaring. Emergency lights flashed red. Vera saw bodies on the floor, some wearing black armor, some wearing Thalani uniforms. Behind them, she could still hear gunfire. The humans were still fighting. They reached a secondary docking bay where a small shuttle waited. Katie pushed Vera inside and sealed the door. "What about the others?" Vera demanded. Katie was already at the controls, her wounded leg leaving bloody footprints on the floor. "They'll make it." "How do you know?" Katie glanced back at her. For the first time, Vera saw something like a smile on her face. "Because they're human." The shuttle launched. Through the viewport, Vera could see the station falling away. Smoke was rising from several sections. Emergency response ships were moving toward the diplomatic sector. Katie opened a communication channel. "Morrison, status." Static. Then Jake's voice, rough and tired. "Hostiles neutralized. Vance is down but stable. Palmer and Santos are mobile. We're heading to extraction point 2. "Copy. See you on the ship." Vera sat in silence as the shuttle flew toward her vessel. Her mind was trying to process what she had witnessed. Her guards, trained warriors of the Thalani Empire, had been cut down in seconds. But the humans, the soft, weak humans she had mocked and dismissed, had stood their ground. No, that wasn't right. They hadn't just stood their ground. They had won. 12 attackers killed, 3 captured. The rest had fled when they realized they were losing. Against a force that had overwhelmed Thalani warriors, 5 humans had held the line. When the shuttle docked with her ship, Vera stepped out in a daze. Her crew rushed to help her, asking questions she couldn't answer. She pushed through them and went to the medical bay. She had to see the humans for herself. They were already there when she arrived. Jake sat on a bed while a medic worked on his shoulder. The wound was ugly, the flesh burned and torn. He showed no sign of pain. Danny Vance lay on another bed, his chest wrapped in bloody bandages. He was awake, talking quietly to Chris Palmer, who had his leg elevated and splinted. Maria Santos was getting stitches in her arm while checking her weapon with her free hand. Katie Dunn was leaning against a wall, refusing to sit down despite the hole in her leg. They looked like they had walked through hell. They were all alive. Vera stood in the doorway, unable to speak. Jake looked up and saw her. "Commander," he said. His voice was hoarse. "Are you injured?" She shook her head slowly. "Good. That's what matters." Vera opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. "How?" she finally managed. Jake tilted his head. "How what, Commander?" "How are you still alive? I saw you get shot. I saw all of you get shot. Any Thalani would be dead." Jake was quiet for a moment. Then he smiled, a thin, exhausted smile. "Humans are hard to kill, Commander. Very hard to kill." Vera looked at the wounded soldiers around her, at the blood and bandages and burns, at the weapons still within easy reach, at the eyes that remained alert despite everything. She thought about all the stories she had called myths. She didn't think they were myths anymore. The ship moved through space in silence. Outside the windows, stars drifted past like scattered diamonds. Inside, the mood was heavy. 17 Thalani soldiers had died in the attack. 17 warriors of the Empire gone in minutes. Vera stood alone in her quarters, staring at a list of names on her datapad. She had known some of these soldiers for years. She had trained with them, fought beside them, trusted them with her life. And they had fallen like grass before a fire, but the humans had lived. She couldn't stop thinking about it. She had watched the battle recordings from the chamber's security cameras, played them over and over again. She had seen her Thalani guards go down one after another despite their superior strength, their armor, their training. She had seen the humans take hits that should have killed them, wounds that would have put any Thalani into shock. And she had watched them keep fighting. Danny Vance, with 2 holes in his chest, firing until his weapon was empty. Jake Morrison, his shoulder a ruin of burned flesh, never slowing down. Katie Dunn, shielding Vera with her own body while returning fire with perfect accuracy. Chris Palmer, dragging himself across the floor with a shattered leg, still shooting. It was impossible. It went against everything Vera knew about biology, about warfare, about survival. But it had happened. She left her quarters and walked to the medical bay. She needed answers. The humans were still there, recovering from their wounds. Danny Vance was sitting up now, eating something from a metal container. He saw Vera enter and gave her a weak smile. "Commander," he said, "good to see you up and around." Vera didn't know how to respond to that. This man had nearly died protecting her, and here he was, making casual conversation like nothing had happened. "How do you feel?" she asked. Danny shrugged, then winced at the movement. "Been better. Been worse. The medics here know their stuff. I'll be back on my feet in a few days." "A few days?" Vera stared at him. "You were shot twice in the chest. Yeah, that wasn't great. But the rounds didn't hit anything important. Just some muscle and a cracked rib. I've had worse in training." Vera didn't know what to say. She turned and found Jake Morrison watching her from his bed. His shoulder was wrapped in clean bandages now, his arm in a sling. But his eyes were as sharp as ever. "Commander," he said, "you have questions?" "Yes." Vera moved closer to him. "Many questions?" Jake nodded. "Then ask." Vera took a deep breath. She had been a soldier all her life. She had learned to analyze battles, to understand tactics, to study the strengths and weaknesses of different species. But nothing had prepared her for what she had witnessed. "How?" she said. "How did you do it? Your species is supposed to be weak, fragile. You have no natural weapons, no armor, no enhanced senses. By every measure, you should have died in that chamber." Jake was quiet for a moment. Then he shifted on the bed, facing her more directly. "Do you know what a human body is, Commander?" Vera frowned. "A biological organism, like any other." "No," Jake shook his head. "A human body is a machine built for survival, not for strength, not for speed, not for natural weapons, for survival, pure, simple survival." He held up his hand, showing his soft, clawless fingers. "You look at this and see weakness. But these hands can grip a weapon for hours without rest. They can make tools, build shelters, create fire. They can hold on when everything in the universe is trying to make them let go." He touched his chest, where his heart was beating. "You look at our bodies and see fragility. But human hearts can keep pumping even with injuries that would kill other species. Our brains can block out pain, flood our systems with chemicals that let us keep fighting when we should be unconscious. We don't have armor because we learn to take damage and keep going." Vera listened in silence. "But that's not the real answer," Jake continued. "The real answer isn't physical, it's something else." "What?" Jake met her eyes. "We don't give up. Ever. It's not that we can't feel pain or fear. We feel them as much as any species. Maybe more. But somewhere in our evolution, we learned that giving up means dying. So we fight, even when we're hurt, even when we're scared, even when every rational part of our brain is screaming at us to stop. We fight until we can't fight anymore. And then we fight some more." Vera thought about the battle, about Danny Vance on his knees, bleeding from his chest, still firing his weapon, about Jake with his shoulder torn open, still moving through the enemy like a blade through water. "Why?" she asked. "Why did your people risk everything for me? We're nothing to you. I treated you badly, I mocked you, I dismissed your concerns, and yet you nearly died to protect me." Jake smiled slightly. "You were under our protection. That's all that matters. But you could have run. You could have escaped. Your primary concern should be your own survival." "No." Jake's voice was firm. "Our primary concern is the mission. And the mission was to keep you safe. Everything else is secondary." "Even your own lives?" "Even our own lives." Vera felt something shift inside her. She had always believed that loyalty came from shared blood, shared culture, shared history. The Thalani were loyal to each other because they were Thalani. The idea that these humans, these strangers, would die for someone who had treated them with contempt was difficult to understand. She moved to Danny Vance's bed. He looked up at her with that same easy smile. "You almost died for me," she said. "Part of the job," Danny replied. "No, it's more than that." Vera struggled to find the right words. "I've seen soldiers die before. I've seen sacrifice. But what you did in that chamber, the way you kept fighting even when you were wounded, that wasn't just training or duty. What was it?" Danny thought about it. "I guess you could call it stubbornness. We're too stupid to know when we're supposed to quit." He laughed, then coughed at the pain. "But honestly, it's because giving up isn't an option. When I was lying there with holes in my chest, I didn't think about dying. I thought about the people counting on me. I thought about Jake and Katie and Chris and Maria. I thought about you. And I knew that if I stopped fighting, someone else might die because I wasn't there to help." He looked at her with surprisingly serious eyes. "That's the thing about humans, Commander. We're not that strong by ourselves, but we're never really by ourselves. We fight for each other, and that makes us stronger than any armor or claws." Vera stood in the medical bay for a long time after that. She looked at these wounded humans, these impossible survivors, and felt something she hadn't felt in a very long time. Respect. Not the empty respect of diplomacy or rank. True respect, the kind that had to be earned through blood and fire. The myths about humans weren't exaggerations. They were understatements. The journey home took 8 days. 8 days of quiet travel through the vast darkness between stars. 8 days. For Vera to think about everything that had happened. She spent most of that time watching the humans. Not with suspicion anymore, not with contempt. She watched them the way a student watches a teacher, trying to understand something important. She noticed things she had missed before. The way they checked on each other constantly, even when they were injured themselves. The way Danny Vance told jokes to keep the mood light, despite the bandages wrapped around his chest. The way Katie Dunn helped Chris Palmer walk when his leg was hurting too much. Even though her own leg was barely healed. They moved like a family. Not by blood, but by something deeper, something forged in fire. On the 3rd day of travel, Vera found Maria Santos in the ship's small gym. The human woman was exercising her injured arm, slowly working through a series of movements. Her face was tight with pain, but she didn't stop. "Should you be doing that?" Vera asked. Maria glanced at her. "Probably not. But the arm needs to move or it'll get stiff. A stiff arm is useless in a fight." "You're thinking about fighting? Already?" "Always." Maria finished her exercise and reached for a towel. "That's how we stay alive. We train when we're healthy. We train when we're hurt. We never stop getting better." Vera sat down on a nearby bench. "I've been trying to understand your species. The more I learn, the less sense it makes." Maria smiled. "We get that a lot. On my world, there's a concept called the Warrior's Code. It says that a true warrior fights with honor, protects the weak, and dies with dignity. I always thought the Thalani understood this better than anyone." Vera paused. "I was wrong. Humans live this code in a way we never could." Maria shrugged. "We don't think of it as a code. It's just how we are. You protect your people. You don't leave anyone behind. You fight until the fight is over." She looked at Vera with curious eyes. "Is that really so strange?" "For most species, yes. Self-preservation is the strongest instinct. When death is certain, retreat is logical." "Maybe that's our weakness," Maria said. "Or maybe it's our strength. We're too stubborn to know when to quit. Sometimes that gets us killed." but sometimes it lets us do impossible things. Vera thought about the battle on Korath Prime. 15 attackers, military-trained, well-armed, against 5 humans and a handful of surviving Thalani guards. The attackers should have won. By every logical calculation, they should have won. But they hadn't. Because the humans refused to accept defeat. On the 5th day, Vera received a message from the Galactic Council. Intelligence had identified the attackers as mercenaries hired by a faction that opposed the Thalani-Vrexy trade agreement. Several arrests had been made. The faction's leaders were facing trial. Justice would be served. But it wouldn't bring back her 17 soldiers. She wrote personal letters to each of their families. It took her 2 days to finish. She told them that their loved ones had died with honor, fighting to protect their commander and their mission. She didn't tell them that they had been outmatched from the start. She didn't tell them that a handful of humans had succeeded where Thalani warriors had failed. Some truths were too painful to share. On the 7th day, the ship received confirmation that Danny Vance would make a full recovery. The medical staff had been amazed by his healing rate. Wounds that would take a Thalani months to recover from were closing in days. "Your biology is remarkable," the chief medical officer told Jake. "I've never seen a species heal so quickly from such severe injuries." Jake accepted the compliment with a small nod. "We're built to survive." That evening, Vera found herself in the observation deck again. The stars were brighter here, far from any planet or station. She stood at the window and let her thoughts drift. Footsteps approached behind her. She didn't need to turn to know it was Jake. "We'll reach Thalani space tomorrow," he said, standing beside her. "Our assignment will be complete." "Yes." Vera was surprised by the sadness in her voice. "I suppose you'll be returning to Earth. Eventually. We'll get a few weeks of rest, then another assignment. Another person to protect, another mission." "That's the job." Vera turned to face him. In the dim light of the observation deck, his face looked older, tired. The face of someone who had seen too much and kept going anyway. "I owe you an apology," she said. "I dismissed your kind as weak. I mocked your concerns. I treated you with contempt when you were only trying to help me." She lowered her head. "I was wrong. About everything." Jake was quiet for a moment. "You're not the first to make that mistake, Commander. Probably won't be the last. But I should have known better. I've fought in wars. I've seen courage and sacrifice. I should have recognized it in your people." She looked up at him. "Instead, I saw only what I expected to see. A soft, fragile species that had somehow fooled the galaxy into fearing them. And now?" Vera thought about it. "Now I understand why the galaxy fears you. It's not because you're strong or fast or have advanced technology. It's because you don't give up. You take the worst the universe can throw at you and keep fighting. That's more terrifying than any weapon." Jake smiled. It was a strange smile, tired and knowing. "The stories about humans," Vera continued, "the ones I called myths, they're all true, aren't they?" Jake's smile faded into something more serious. "The stories you've heard? Those are the tame ones. The galaxy shares the tales that make sense, the ones that fit into neat categories." He looked out at the stars. "The real stories, the ones we tell among ourselves, those are different. Those are the ones that would keep you awake at night." Vera felt a chill run down her spine. She had thought she understood now, but Jake's words suggested depths she hadn't even imagined. "Will you tell me one?" she asked. "A real story?" Jake considered it. "Maybe someday, when you're ready." The ship flew on through the darkness. Tomorrow they would reach Thalani. Space. The humans would leave. moving on to their next mission, their next battle. Life would return to normal. But for Vera, nothing would ever be the same. She had seen the truth behind the myths. She had witnessed human warriors in battle. She had watched them bleed and suffer and refuse to die. She had laughed at the stories once. She would never laugh at them again. As the stars drifted past the window, Jake Morrison turned and walked away. Just before he reached the door, he paused and looked back. "For what it's worth, Commander," he said. "You did well in that chamber. Most people freeze when the shooting starts. You kept your head. That takes courage." Vera didn't know what to say. Jake smiled one last time. Maybe there's a bit of human in you after all. Then he was gone, leaving Vera alone with the stars and her thoughts and a new understanding of what it truly meant to be a warrior. The galaxy was vast and dangerous and full of wonders. But perhaps the greatest wonder of all was the small, soft, stubborn species from a death world called Earth, the humans. And Vera would never underestimate them again.